In July of this year, Chicago was forced by the Supreme Court of the United States to amend its municipal code on the regulation of firearms. The Supreme Court decision in the case McDonald versus City of Chicago said that the Second Amendment right to to own a firearm for self-defense did in fact apply to the states and cannot be taken away by local government. Now, at face value, the current revised version of the Chicago gun ordinance seems to be in good standing with the Supreme Court decision. However, it is still fatally flawed in that its underlying intent is to stop citizens from obtaining firearms, leaving them defenseless and vulnerable. In our time that I have here with you today, I will show you where Chicago went wrong and how you, from the state level, can protect our citizens' rights, especially those in Chicago. Now, the Chicago gun ordinance, as it reads now, does require a training class that includes 1 hour of range time where you practice with your firearm. I did some calling around, and these are the 3 closest locations that offer this training class to Chicago. You notice none of them are actually inside Chicago city limits. It's because Chicago has actually outlawed the public using the gun ranges. So they're making it so that the residents of Chicago actually have to travel 20 minutes to an hour to be able to fulfill this requirement for their Chicago firearms permit. Now, while the law does allow for someone who has a Chicago firearms permit to keep one working firearm in the home, they can't take it onto their porch or even into their garage without violating the ordinance. So this is you can't see it very well, but this is a sample basic landscaping plot. It shows the house in the middle, and the green dashed lines show where a person would be allowed to have their firearm. But if you're, say, doing something in your yard or even working on your car in the garage and you have a firearm with you, that's in violation, and that can bring huge fines and even jail time. Now, this Chicago gun ordinance is so restrictive and confusing that it causes many Chicago citizens to not even attempt to become licensed to carry a firearm, effectively banning firearms in the city, while technically still adhering to the Supreme Court decision that they must allow citizens to own firearms. Now, some of you might wonder why a ban on firearms would be so bad. Now, for today, since constitutionality of a handgun ban has been discussed at length before the Supreme Court in the cases Washington, D.C. versus Heller and McDonald versus City of Chicago, we'll just deal with the social aspect. Now, Michael Badnarik, the 2004 presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, may have said it best when he said, "Gun bans disarm victims, putting them at the mercy of murderers and terrorists who think nothing of breaking the gun laws." Criminals, the inherent problem with gun laws is that criminals will always find a way to obtain firearms. They have plans to rape, murder, and steal. The gun laws are the farthest thing from their mind. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice did a survey of incarcerated felons and found that 57% of them were more worried about encountering an armed victim than they were about police. Now, I do want to remind you, this was a survey of incarcerated felons. So these are the bad guys who have been caught and sentenced and are serving jail time, and yet they're still more afraid of an armed victim. Why would that be? Because an armed victim can respond immediately, whereas the police response can be delayed anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. Now, if you're a victim in your home of a burglary with violent intent, even if you do have an alarm system that's notified immediately when someone breaks in, it takes them a moment to connect the call to your home. It takes up to 30 seconds for them to realize that you're not going to answer. And then it can take the alarm company another 30 seconds to 2 minutes to alert the police dispatch to the situation. Then another 5 to even 20 minutes for the police to arrive at your home. According to the ABC News affiliate in Chicago, some Chicago residents have even reported up to 30 minutes having to wait for the police to arrive at their home. Now think about 30 minutes in your home with a criminal and what could have happened. Now, how much worse could it be if you're on the streets of Chicago instead of in your home and the assailant takes your cell phone away from you, so you can't even report the crime until after it's over, if you're even alive to report it at all. Now, the Department of Justice survey also found that 74% of felons avoid burglarizing houses when people are home because they're afraid of being shot during the crime. So it would seem that the real answer to violent crime is to let the citizens protect themselves. We can't always keep a police officer in our home with us, or in our pocket when we're traveling, or in our backpack. But a firearm that we know how to use is the next best thing. We need to let citizens protect themselves in and out of their home. Now, in 1982, when Chicago was originally drafting their gun ordinance to stop the rise of violent crime in their city, Georgia also had an initiative to reduce their crime rate. But instead of restricting gun ownership, they actually loosened the restrictions, letting more people own guns. A suburb of Atlanta, Kennesaw, Georgia, actually required that every head of household keep one working firearm in the home for self-defense. Now, how did that work out for them, you might ask? In Georgia, overall, their crime rate went down 10.4%. It's respectable. But that is nothing compared to Kennesaw's burglary rate, which went down 89% once every home was armed. And that's according to Gary Kleck in his article, Crime Control Through the Use of Armed Force for Social Problems magazine. Now, Chicago took the opposite approach by restricting the gun laws, and they had the opposite effect. Their crime rate skyrocketed, going up 43% in less than 10 years, according to the FBI's Crime in the United States report. So what does this all mean? It means that we need to save Chicago from its city council. I brought before you today a bill that details how we, from the state level, can still let Chicago regulate their firearms without leaving the citizens with no way to defend themselves. Under Illinois House Bill 223, the city requirements, the cities and municipalities may still require licensing if they wish, but they must allow for the expectations to be met within the city limits. For example, city-funded training classes in Chicago. And also, once a person is authorized to own firearms, they can keep as many as they see fit for their own safety in their home. Their home would then be defined as their dwelling, along with the property associated with it, and any outbuildings or structures. So if you have a shed on your property, you would be safe carrying it there too. And also, once a person is authorized to own a firearm, they may carry any legally owned firearm with them as long as they are carrying also their Illinois State Firearm Owner's Identification Card and any city-issued permits. Now think back for a moment to the assailant who broke into your home or assaulted you on the street. How would that situation have been different if you had a firearm available for self-defense? In a best-case scenario, you would draw your firearm, he would see it, and leave. If he doesn't leave right away, you still have the opportunity to protect yourself by pulling the trigger to disable or neutralize the threat. Then you're able to safely answer the phone when the alarm company calls, or use your cell phone to notify the police. And then you can wait for the police to arrive